Happy Friday, beautiful people. Good morning. Guess who's in the studio with me this Friday? My spiritual director.
Good morning.
Enroue Halfkenny is here. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
And it's a good day to have these conversations. And people are ready too. People are like, I said, Enroue's coming on tomorrow. Oh, I'm tuning in. I was like, okay.
Yeah, and I even had some ideas around like some things I wanted to share.
That's good.
I mean, I'm always happy to bounce off of questions and curiosities and see where these things go. But I had some
a little
bit of intentionality. So actually, first, kind of before I go into that part, I just wanted to give thanks for your successful surgeries and procedures.
Thank you.
As it looks, the recovery is going well.
Yes.
We've got some clarity around what your health is doing and what it's not doing.
Yes.
And actually what I wanted to share is, so in the Orisha tradition, there's an Orisha named Ogun, O-G-U-N. And so as you were telling me and you're kind of preparing for this recent surgery, Ogun is a force, and there's lots of complexities with different Orisha and what they're connected to and aspects of them and energies behind them. And Ogun is particularly one who is connected to metals, is connected to people who use and make tools. So whether that's and like iron and the forge and blacksmiths, but also people who are in the military, people who are carpenters, people because they're using tools, but also surgeons. Dentists are also included in there, people who fish, right? Because they're also hunters. So these aspects of this energy, which is both can be creative and destructive, right? So, right, the knife could be a scalpel or it can be a weapon. Right? And so the same force is kind of behind that.
Lord, that's heavy.
Yeah, and so it's a really dynamic force now, and it's very much around these qualities of honesty and directness. And actually, traditionally, in court or in disputes, people would hold a piece of iron to make that they would vow on because of the seriousness that they take that energy of honesty and the as a knife cut or as a machete cuts through the bush to make a path as the pathway of an arrow or a bullet, straight and direct. And so as you were going through this, so some of the prayers, that I was saying really had to do with not just hoping that you're well, but also this prayer for the guidance and that energy to guide, the surgeons, to guide all the people who are involved in this surgery and in your kind of health, that force is a force of goodness, and that is a force that helps to propel you in your health and your wellness and well-being.
Thank you. And my surgeon is a Nigerian. I don't know.
He may have got worried if you started to say we're going to say some prayers and offerings to Ogun. He might, just because someone's from, he may not have been Yoruba, and also whether he was a traditionalist or
I just
some
love
other faith to be interesting.
That there's this weird sort of connection back to the continent always.
Yeah, right.
Do you know that's the point that I'm making?
Yeah,
That how often do you run into a Nigerian surgeon? I don't often,
right.
And he happened to be my surgeon, so it's okay.
Yeah.
And then you come with your prayers, which are, bring me back to the origins of ourselves. So
there's a great prayer for Ogun. The Yoruba is Oun Bogbon Togun, which means all things belong to Ogun. And it's done in it's actually the sound of a drum. So
I heard that.
I'm stretching a little bit, and I'm going to come back to this other point that I wanted to make, but this other aspect of Yoruba. So many people have heard of a talking drum. It's a particular type of drum. It's got two heads, got fibers, and it makes that kind of sound. And so Yoruba is a tonal language, which means that depending on the tone, the word has a completely different meaning. And they're not actually necessarily related, right? So we might think, I'm not even going to think of some other examples, but let's see, ile or ile are different words with completely different meanings. And so in Yoruba, so there's an actual parallel of drum language and spoken language, which is why it's called a talking drum. Not just because it sounds kind of like somebody might be talking, but literally it's the language. A friend of mine was in Nigeria who's a drummer from here and was playing, and like this young boy came up to him and was like, I really like your playing. Like the rhythms are really beautiful, but I have no idea what you're saying.
Oh.
And it was really striking, like, oh,
wow.
this is not like, you know, that's where the language lives. And so the saying is also done by a drum, and you can hear it. So I'm going to repeat it a few times. You can kind of hear how a drum would sound doing it. So Oung bogbon togun, oung bogbon togun, oung bogbon togun. And so that's all things belong to Ogun.
I hear that.
And it's all things because outside of the kind of natural world, everything that we have here is made by something, right? By a tool of some kind. And Ogun is kind of the owner of that. So in some ways, Ogun is related to all of these things.
Oh, I like that.
So I wanted to share some of that also as like this concrete way and like what it means to, you know, how we worship, how we pray, what these are all connected to kind of demystify some of this, like, what is this practice, right? And these are real concrete ways that these practices show up for ourselves and for people in our community. So I wanted to share a little bit of that. The other thing is this concept of Ori, O-R-I, and actually Ori Inu, so our inner head. And, you know, because of your recent surgery, it's like, oh, what are these? So something about Ori, obviously, it's not that much of a stretch why I would think of heads, but came up. But it's a really important concept among traditional Yoruba practitioners and Orisha practitioners. And what it is that our head, our spiritual head, houses our destiny and houses our purpose.
Yes.
Right.
But that makes sense, right? Yeah. Because in my practice, when you know, spiritual direction, you know, when you go into a contemplative mode or time of discernment, you start in your head. You start where, you know, you start in your head and you find you quiet the mind first, right? Yes. Yeah. Because when you can quiet the mind, then the body will follow. Yeah. So, okay.
And there's a lot in Africa in general, but also among the Yoruba about a cool head. So coolness is a value that, you know, we do ritual to cool our head. Being too hot is not just kind of where trouble happens, but again, pulls us out of being able to make really good choices and pulls us out of being able to discern what's the best path for us to take. So I wanted to share a story, part of the sacred literature about...
Oh, please.
And it illustrates some of the layers of both destiny and purpose in our head. And then I'm happy, obviously, answer whatever questions come up. So, and I'll try not to I'm just going to tell the story and then we can kind of tease apart aspects of it. Sometimes I can get into well, this means this. You need to know this first. I'm going to let that go. In heaven, there were 3 friends. And it was their time to come to earth, to be born as human beings. And so they met with their elders, and their elders told them, you have to go directly to this person, Ajala. And Ajala is the person who molds our heads, our destinies in heaven, out of clay. And so he said, well, you know, before you go to, you're born, you have to go to Ajala to get your head, to get your destiny, and then you'll be born. And don't veer to the left, don't veer to the right, go directly there. And they said, okay. And as they were leaving, one of the friends heard, actually, this is a son of Ogun, heard their father at the forge, you know, making tools and chanting and singing and praying, and had this moment of oh, I should go talk to my father before I'm born. It's oh no, but the elders told me to just go directly. So they continue on. A little while later, another friend hears his father, who is Ifa, another Orisha, chanting these sacred verses. And it says, oh, I really need to go talk to my father. And the friend said, no, remember, the elder said, we have to go directly there. And he said, no, I'm going to go talk to my father and tell him where I'm going and get any advice from him. And the friend said, okay, you do that. And they left. and he goes and speaks with his father. And Ifa is the Orisha of wisdom and is actually considered the one who is a witness to our destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And Ifa said, well, I'm glad you came, and actually did a spiritual reading for him and said, well, these are the items you need to bring with you. These are part of your offerings. So in this tradition, making offerings, I think we talked about this, and sacrifice is a part of this relationship building. So he said, well, you need these bags of salt and, you know, this amount of money, and then you can go on your way. They made some offerings and kept some of that with him, and he traveled. And the two friends were walking, and they came across a person who was making pounded yam, which is a dish with using a mortar and pestle, but instead of the pestle, was using a needle. So it was trying to pound yam with this tiny little needle.
Oh man!
And they were like, "Do you know the place that we need to go to Ajala's?" And they were like, "He said, well, I'm busy. I can tell you after." They said, "No, we don't have time," and they just continued on. A little while later, this other person came, and he saw the same person, and his name is Afuwape, and this is Ifa's son. And he saw the same person, and the person said, well, I can give you directions, but you have to wait till after I'm done pounding this yam. And he said, oh, well, okay, I'll stay with you and I'll help you. And so together they sat and they pounded this yam out of, with this needle, which, obviously takes a long time. And when he was done, he said, okay, well, you actually want to go to the left here, right at this crossroads, and that's a shortcut, and that will take you to Ajala's place. And the other two friends had walked for a long time, and they finally get to Ajala's place, and nobody's there. And there's a storehouse which has all of these heads waiting. And he said, well, Ajala's not here. We'll just go to a storeroom and we'll pick out one for ourselves. And they go in and they see all of these clay heads displayed all over the place. And they pick one up, and there's one. He's like, oh, this is a really big one. I really like it. And he says, okay. And he puts that on. And as soon as he puts it on, Eshu, who's an Orisha that's about choice, right, who lives at the crossroads, kind of pointed his ashe, pointed like his medicine at him, and kind of sealed that choice.
Oh,
right. So he said, you put that on, boom, sealed, and that person got born. His friend saw another one that looked finely decorated. Oh, these beautiful designs on it. He said, oh, I love that one's beautiful. I like that one. That's going to be a good head. And he put that on. Mm-hmm. Eshu pointed his ashe at him, and that sealed, and then he was born. And sometime later, Afuwape is still on his journey and comes across another person who is cooking soup. And he says, oh, uncle, do you know is this the way to Ajala's? He says, yes, this is. And Afuwape sees him, and he sees him taking ash and putting it in the soup as a spice, kind of potash. And Afuwape says, well, why are you using that? He's like, well, I'm flavoring the soup. And he says, oh, well, I have this salt, that he had been given for this offering. Well, why don't you try some of this? He takes a little bit of the salt and puts it in the soup. And he's like, oh, I like that much better. And so Afuwape gives him the bags of salt. And this person says, oh, one thing. When you go to Ajala's, just be aware, Ajala owes lots of people money. And he may be hiding because all these people are searching for him to get their debts. So just be patient. And, you want to make sure that he leads you into the storehouse to pick out a good head. And so Afuwape said, oh, thank you very much, uncle, and continues on his way. And when he gets to Ajala's house, there are all these people there yelling and looking for him. And he goes to them and says, what's going on? He said, well, Ajala owes us all this money. And, we're looking for him and we can't find him. And Afuwape goes from one to the other and says, well, how much does he owe you? He says, oh, I owes him, $5,000. And he looks in he says, oh, well, here's $5,000. And Afuwape gives him $5,000. And the next one says, oh, he owes me $200. And he gives him $200. And one by one, he pays all the people who are there, and that comes out to be exactly the amount of money that he had. So all the debtors leave, and it's just Afuwape there by himself. And he looks around, and then he hears some rustling from the in the house, kind of above in the attic, and Ajala comes down, and he's like, "Oh, like who are you?" He says, "Oh, I'm Afuwape. I'm looking for Ajala to get ahead so I can be born." He says, well, I'm Ajala. Where did all those people go? And Afuwape said, well, they were here making a lot of noise, and I was able to give them some money, and they left. And Ajala said, oh, thank you very much. They've been hounding me, and I've been behind in paying off my bills. You're looking for a head. Come with me. Come into my storeroom. And he takes Afwape into the storeroom. And Afwape sees all of these beautiful heads, and he picks one. He's like, "Oh, this one's beautiful." And Ajala says, "No. Don't take that one. That one's not fired yet." He says, "Oh," and he puts it down. And he picks up another one that's beautifully carved and intricate designs. He says, "Oh, how about this one?" He said, "No. Those are cracks. Those are not designs. You don't want that one." And Ajala goes and picks up another head and takes a stick and hits it, and it makes this beautiful sound like a bell. And he says, "This is a good one." And he takes it, he throws it on the floor, and it bounces back up. He's, "This is a good, strong, this is a good head for you." And he gives it to Afwape, and Afwape thanks him and puts it on. And Eshu points his ashe at him, and it seals, and he's born. Now it's understood that one of the most difficult journeys that we make as human beings is less than 12 inches, which is the distance between right, being inside the womb and being born. And so spiritually during that time, it's as if we're going through this storm. It's like rains are coming down, these winds. And so as the first two people went through, that first head hadn't been fired yet, right? And so what happens with clay if like you pour water all over? So bits and pieces start to fall off of it. And the second one, when he went, that was cracked, and all the pressure of being born, bits and pieces started falling off of that head as well. And so when they were born, those two friends who went first, all the things that they tried to do in their life, just the regular good things that they were trying to do to have a good life, weren't working as well. And what they actually, because their own head, their kind of destiny was damaged. And so what they had to do was to make offerings and prayers to repair their head, right? So, but at first they didn't know this. So they're trying to do things and put one to one, and then nothing comes out of it. And so they're together on earth kind of struggling. And they look up and they see Afwape coming towards them on a horse. And traditionally this, a horse is a symbol of wealth, of well-being, of success. And they look at him and they say, "What? How is that possible? I wish I had gone where you had gone to get your destiny, because clearly your destiny is so much better than ours." And Afwape sees them and he says, "No, we went to the same place to get our destiny, but our destinies are different." And in the Orisha tradition, we all have different heads. We all have different destinies. And like, I know people, and I'm sure you know people who, no matter what they do, they struggle, and like nothing comes of it. And other people, they do like the smallest thing, and like doors open before them, and like this happens with ease.
Yes.
And it's not that the fixed aspect of our destiny is that like these two people are just going to suffer forever. But what it means is that we have to do spiritual work to mend our heads so that we kind of can get to normal and then really live into our destiny. And even in my practice, healing and liberation counseling, it's that aspect of healing. So then we get to a point and then we grow into the life that we want, into the liberation that we want. And so that part of the sacred literature speaks of this journey from heaven to earth, speaks of the importance of our ori, our head, which is the seat of our destiny, and then the work that we need to do as when we're alive to manifest that, to really manifest what our potential is and to manifest what our purpose is.
And that is the universal story across all religions, that so as a man thinketh, so is he.
Yeah.
Right? That's just what it is. Change your mind to change your circumstance.
Yeah. And work. And there's work.
But there's work. You just can't say, "Oh well, whatever."
In my destiny, I'm just going to show up and
No, you got to do the work. I mean, you've got to. I'm a big fan of the Course in Miracles, right? I love the book of Course in Miracles, and I love the Marianne Williamson's teaching of it. And she said, one of the Course in Miracles says, it is not for you to seek love; it is for you to remove all barriers to love. And when you hear that, you think, wow. At least when I heard it, it spoke to me in a big way. Like, don't chase love. Just remove all the barriers to love so that love can find you. Yeah. And you can step into it. And you can recognize it.
Because if you're just running after, and that's so many things, you're just running after something.
Yeah. Right? With no direction, with no clear purpose, with no...
And without an understanding of that, it's actually connected to a yearning you have and something inside that you have.
Yeah.
Because then you find something that you think looks like it. And then like, oh, this isn't as relevant as I thought it was. This isn't actually for me. Because they didn't bring their needs along. They didn't bring on their own yearnings to what they're seeking, which is really important.
So that story was amazing because that's the universal story of, all of us, different destinies, but, what do you, how do you
how do you choose?
Right. And what are the steps that you need to take? And it requires work. And I think that's the hard part for people, to recognize what the work is for them, for each and every one of us. What is that internal work like to get you to where you say you want to go, what you believe your destiny is?
Right. Yeah.
So.
And I love that in this, many times when I consult with people, here's the picture of what's happening for you now. We explore that. And then many feel like, oh, okay, I have to go do that. Like I have to go fix it all. And it's like, well, no. You actually have support, right? So this person, so Afuape went to like his father and went to the tradition to say like, I need support to do this. I need help to figure out how to do this in a way that's really going to work. That's going to kind of have the fruition that I want. And I think that's such an important piece, which we can forget in this culture, that like, no, it's not about like, okay, here's the thing, go figure it out. It's, there's, our ancestors, there's the Orisha, there's like our connection to the divine and the sacred, which we can actually go for the actual support, the real relevant things, not the like, I want peace in my life, right? But like, no, I'm trying to find someone, or like, this is a challenge with this person, help me to overcome that, or this is the specific things that live in our hearts.
Yes.
If we can touch that and bring ourselves there and bring our prayers and our relationships to that place, then the response can be there. If all I bring to whoever is, I just want some peace, or,
but you ain't bringing peace.
Right.
You ain't bringing wellness.
Well, and it's also general. It's like, okay, here's some general peace. Or wellness. I don't know what that is. But like the more we can really touch in ourselves what we're seeking and be honest with that.
Yeah. That's the point.
Then
that's the key. Enroue, that's the key. The truth.
Yeah.
The truth. And I don't know if people walk in truth deliberately in their own selves. I think that, because I see it with people, be in the truth of things. You don't have to, people think they have to go around and declare, out loud to other people their truth. No, you don't have to do that. But you do have to sort of be clear about what your truth is in your own time, away from, like, when you're in those moments when you're alone, you ought to be able to tell the truth about your life and who you are.
So I have this moment, like I want to say yes. And I also know, both in myself and people I work with, we have different capacities for that. Because sometimes, like, the truth, whatever that kind of thing, is really painful.
Oh, I know.
And we've worked hard to manage that pain. There's actually been the like I think for myself, I didn't really believe that was important. It was the like, how do I manage these things? How do I manage the dynamics that I see, the relationships that are hard? And actually, there was some really clear avoidance that like, well, I can maybe be a little bit honest with myself, but I'm not going to let anybody see that, because I felt a certain risk with that.
Yeah.
But then it also meant that I started to behave in that way. So I kind of believed that own, like, oh, I guess all there really is this mask.
Yeah.
And then, right, for me, I got to this place like, oh, that's not enough. Like, that's really not enough for me. And if this life is about, if I'm actually relevant, or if this is supposed to be something for me and not just what I'm presenting, I got to deal with that differently.
Yeah.
But I didn't even have that capacity kind of before something brought me there, right? And my life brought me there. And so then what kind of the truth is, I just want to, like, it can be easy to be like, you're not being honest and you need to right? This way that it can be like a righteous kind of judging. Yeah. And like also with this acknowledgement in like, well, sometimes we make the choice, which is healthy, to like, I can't bear that burden right now. I'm going to see it. I'm like, okay, that's a thing. I'm going to put it over here. I want to have a little bit more capacity. Yeah. I'm going to try to come back to it. And that's actually also the truth. Yes. Right. Yes. But people got to do that work though. You have to do. Well, nobody can actually do that for you. That's what I mean. You have to, that's a one-on-one, one-on-you kind of thing. Well, yes. And I'm going to say this again. Yes. And because it's in those quiet places, like I hear what you're saying, because you're like, when you're alone, like kind of physically alone or looking internally, and we're also not alone.
Right.
And so that's a piece that's, I think is really important. Because if it was, okay, do it by yourself, figure it out. Like, well, I got these tools that don't work.
That's a good point.
That got me here.
And calling on the ancestors
right.
is really, it's what I used to tell people. This is how you keep your own counsel. You keep your own counsel, and that embodies, whatever you call up to reinforce your support.
Yeah.
And so since we're having this conversation, that's the ancestral support.
Yep.
So that's your counsel. You call up your own counsel, keep your own counsel, and that's your ancestors. And
and they were human beings. They understand these things, right? If you look at the wisdom and experience of all of your ancestors, it's probably likely that they have some understanding of the types of things you're going through.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's specific things we may have about like social media and but like things about like being a person.
Like my grandmama won't know about social media, but she will know about
what you need to do and how you need to relate to yourself and be honest, or the challenges of not having the relationship you want, or having one, and it's not one that's really healthy for you, and what to do around that, or ways that they've gotten lost, or how do you then, what are the cycles I want to keep, and what are the cycles I want to break?
Yeah.
And in our curiosity, I want to say, because it's not always clarity, but in our curiosity, we can then start to see some of the choices we have. Like, oh, here's some wisdom to like, how do I manage like the stress of being? So I had a client who was basically the matriarch of the family, and the burdens that she was holding, were just too much. The stress was just grinding, and so we were meeting each other. The stress was just grinding her down. And in this piece around talking about her grandmothers who had passed, so it's someone who doesn't come from an understanding of or reach a tradition, but understands in a lived way the connection to our ancestors, because we have that, because they're our people. And so helping her to envision sitting and being with her grandmothers, two things happened. One, she had a lap to rest on, right? She could, I can rest. They'll hold me. Right? There was a level of comfort and a place of rest, which she didn't experience in her day-to-day. And the other thing was that she had peers, because as grandmothers, which my client was, as the matriarchs, they understood that burden and also understood, like, these are ways that you carry it and these are the ways you put it down. And so had a peer, and all of a sudden she wasn't alone. And so in that moment, there was a ton of reckoning and resolution and recovery and rest, all these great R words, as well as something that she could kind of continue on her own to say, like, oh, I get to continue to cultivate this relationship so that I recognize I'm not alone. And even though I still have to deal with some of these circumstances haven't changed, how they land on me, where I put them down, how do I navigate them, how do I dodge them, how do I stop them, how do I hold them close, there's a little bit more tools, more capacity, more ability to navigate those things.
I like that. That's really good. And the other part of the truth is the vulnerable part, to put yourself in the place of being vulnerable. And that's a very hard thing, because we are told to man up or to toughen up or to don't show any sign of weakness. Don't give anybody access to your heart, because they're gonna break it. Don't be the first to say I love you. Don't you know what I mean? Like, we have all these barriers to love.
And to being humans.
And to being human.
I mean, that's what that is, and that comes from thousands of years. Well, I won't go that far, but it comes from, if we at least look at like what systems of oppression have done in this country. Comes from a dehumanizing experience, and the ways to survive, right, that dehumanizing experience were, on one hand, kind of adopting some of that, right? So I can't let myself be seen or experienced in that way, and then we start behaving that way, and then that becomes a part of our culture, while at the same time finding other ways of still finding those little roots and branches and connections to being a human being and to loving and to caring. But like you said, it can be really tricky to kind of say, oh, I can claim that tenderness. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to get rolled over. There's the fear of that. And that's a trauma response. You know, why can't anywhere touch this tenderness? Because someone's going to take advantage of it. Because these are the ways it has happened for me and my family, all. And to say like, okay, well, we're here now. We are alive right now. And this is our opportunity. And so let's see how this life and us and the relationship between us and our lives and our that we are in it and of it can be as full as possible. And sometimes that means working to change systems. Sometimes that means being a good partner, being a good parent. Sometimes that means
I'm so
just
glad
being
you
in the
said
community.
that, because there's all ways to get to liberation, right? Like there's all ways to get to not just, you know, I think that's a good point.
We all have different destinies.
Yeah.
Right?
I think you make
we
that's
all
such
have
a
different
good point.
destinies. Yeah.
That, you know, sometimes you're called to be a better partner or a better parent, or sometimes you're called to be on the front lines of some march, you know, or sometimes you're called to be the best house in the neighborhood where kids feel safe and can play.
Or sometimes it's to be the best ourselves,
or the
not
best
even
ourselves.
Not even in the doings that we do.
Yes.
But how can we be the best, right? And that means that actually goes back, which is the challenge, to where the vulnerability is and the intimacy is with ourselves. Can we give ourselves the kind of love and attention and compassion that we give outwards?
And that's a very difficult thing. And I've just learned this in the last few years of my life. You know, I heard it. You know, you hear this on an intellectual level.
There are these things that people talk about.
You know,
right.
But on a very personal, everyday, practical life thing, it was very difficult to sort of stand in that self. It's beyond self-care. This is truly how you want to be in the world. And it took me so long to understand that, you know.
Yeah. So one is, to include ourselves in liberation.
Yes.
Right.
And I don't think we do that.
Which we don't do that very well. and one thing I want to throw out there, knowing or cautious of how it might land. So from a kind of Abrahamic Judeo-Christian lens, being the sacrifice is embedded in that faith tradition.
It is.
Right?
It is.
In the Orisha tradition and in other traditions, being the sacrifice is not the thing. Making sacrifices are important.
Yeah.
But not being the sacrifice.
Because that, you know, we've been taught that it's honor. There's honor in sacrifice.
Yeah.
You're a good mother if you sacrifice your life for the benefit of everybody in the house.
Look at all these movies, right? I mean, in terms of men, like being the one, and I killed the thing, but I die, but they live. Like that's the glory.
Yes.
Right. I'm the martyr. There's a tradition of martyrdom in that way, and a real. So just that distinction, I have found to be liberating and important, and also seeing where it's grounded in different cultures differently. And so this in the Orisha tradition, you know, we make sacrifices, and so that we can live in good relationship. There's the line of being the sacrifice where not just, and this is where it can get, where it teases out in the specifics of the person, right? So one person can be like, well, I'm gonna sacrifice this thing or this, you know, for someone else, right? And we can do that, and you know, it's not taxing on us. But you know, like in this story of this example of a client of mine, this grandmother, right, she was becoming the sacrifice.
Yes.
And that was actually grinding her down, right? And that kills us. I mean, there's no short way to say that.
And we see it.
Right.
We see it in our communities with the health challenges that we are overexposed to. Like, we are high numbers of these things.
All over the place, right? Physically, mentally, spiritually, our circumstances, our relationships, right, are negatively impacted by lots of things, but like, you know, our poor health, but by also, I think, an aspect of not being able to put kind of our own health and well-being and liberation in the equation. And in some ways, even as we talk about these systems kind of out there, they're very real ways that the ways that they hit us the hardest is when it's in our community, it's in our families, right? It's in the people who we love who harm us. And so it becomes really confusing around, like, what do I need to do to keep myself safe? And that becomes like a kind of a walling in. And then, like, but I still have to do these things for other people, so I'll just suffer so that they get a little bit more.
Yes.
Right?
Oh my God, say that again, Enroue. And I'm seeing that over and over played out.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to take it. I'm going to suffer so that they can have something or more or whatever they,
Right. And it's tricky because it's not to say, so that's I think where the specific details are important, where the difference is about being the sacrifice or making sacrifices. Because we can make sacrifices. So I'm giving up what I have so that you can have. I'm making a sacrifice.
Yes.
Right? And even with like organizations or families or kind of systems, like, what's challenging if you don't, like, if you start to choose your wellness, right? Right. Which after the place that it's hardest is, so if your habit is to not do that, right? Then you set up a dynamic and a norm around other people's needs being prioritized. If all of a sudden you start saying like, oh, what I need is really important, people experience that as like a withdrawing of your care and attention from them.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're used to you being there 24/7. If you're like, well, I'm only gonna be there 20 hours, they're like, well, why are you leaving me for 4?
Yeah. And
the challenge is that's how it's experienced. That's not necessarily true. That might be very real for them. It might be real for you. There's feelings of like, oh, I'm letting them down. Or now I see if I don't do 8 things and I'm only doing 6, the 2 are going to fall.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Black women own that life.
And it might be okay. And it might mean that someone else has to come and get the 2, or the system has to change to pick up the 2 instead of volunteering our lives and sacrificing our lives for something that actually isn't even serving us.
Oh, come on, somebody.
I say.
Come on, somebody. Yeah. That is so, Enroue, that is the God's honest truth. That is a God, and I see it over and over and over and over again. And I'm trying to liberate my own self from that, from what I set up, from that dynamic. Because I created this dynamic, right? Thinking, oh, this is how you be a good whatever.
Yes.
And now it's not serving me. And I see it. And so now I'm like, no, I don't want to do that for you anymore. And they feel some kind of way.
And you feel some kind of way. Right? Because it's the like, oh, what I used to, and the guilt. And they're like, well, maybe just one more. I just do a little bit. I'm not going to say no. I'll say tomorrow. Right. Actually, in working with a lot of students,
oh Lord,
because they're social work students who are in the kind of the beginning of this career, I say to them, like, when you go into a new situation, set your limits early.
Yes.
Right. Do your 9 to 5, and if you choose to stay a little bit longer, make another phone call, do another this, do another that. That's your choice. You are choosing. That's the sacrifice you're making. Right? I'm going to make this sacrifice. I'm going to stay longer. I'm going to make the extra phone call. I'm going to drive someone somewhere. And that's easier to do. You're then choosing to stretch a little bit.
Yeah.
If your stretch becomes the norm, that is not sustainable.
And then it becomes their expectation.
Right. And they're like, okay, this is just what you do.
Yeah.
And then when you're like, oh, I need to come back, then it's experienced as you're not a team player.
Right.
You're letting us down.
Yes.
Right. Which we then internalize.
I see it in people's families.
Yeah, exactly.
They call you for everything as if, and then you go and do it. And the more you do, the more they want done.
Well, two things. So one is, if you don't have a good no, your yes actually doesn't mean anything.
Whoa.
Right. Because if you're just saying yes everywhere, what does that really mean? Right? How is your yes actually about you saying, yes, I want to do that?
Yes.
Right? Which is different. So you need a little bit of a no.
Yeah.
Right? Say, no. The other challenge is how to maintain the relationship while you're setting those limits.
Yes.
So the no doesn't become, no, I don't care about you. because that's how it's experienced. It's the, no, I can't do that thing, and I care about you.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's
I think
the complexity.
I think that's where people get tripped up, and they don't. There's no tools or awareness around how to do that.
How to do both and.
Yes, how to do both.
It's the either or. If you're not here, then you haven't shown up.
Yeah.
You don't. Where's your integrity? Da 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 da. You're bad.
Yeah.
And if you're there, then that's good. But like to say I'm not here and I'm connected and you matter and I have to do these other things that are also important.
Yeah.
It is hard. It's confusing for people because we haven't developed that capacity of the complexity of relationships versus like I love you or I hate you.
Yeah.
Right. And it shows up in these particular ways. Like, well, no, like I really love you. And
but
I have to be somewhere, but I'm not doing that.
I love you, but I'm not doing that.
Right.
I think I've mastered that so far. But I've only mastered it since I've been 50. So I've only mastered it in the last 5 years. No, I'm not doing it. My favorite thing is no, I'm not doing that. Yeah. And I've said it enough where I'm comfortable and I don't wince when I say it to people. No, I'm not doing that. And then I just move on. But I see other people struggle with the no.
Right. Oh, yeah. People struggle with it.
I see people struggle with the no.
So it's like, I just want
and
you,
their
why
no's
aren't
are
you
not
doing
strong.
This thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it.
There's a great quote by Howard Thurman, which ties in with some of this, don't do what you think the world needs. Find what makes you come alive and do that instead. Because what the world needs is people who've come alive.
Yes.
Right? And that spoke to me and that speaks to me so much because of I grew up with like, if you can do it, you should do it. Instead of, right, and that comes from like, why isn't this what people need?
Yeah.
They need me to show up like this, and they needed it, and so I'm gonna do the thing. And like, well, but if if it's grinding me down, how is that connected to life?
Yes,
and what life and liberation is.
And when you do things begrudgingly, when it's not a joyous yes, then it's a pitiful no. You know what I mean? Like it's a no that, like you just said, it's a no with no weight. Yeah. So you might as well just,
Well, but here's the difference. So I think that if you're saying I'm making this sacrifice, like I don't want to do this, but I'm choosing for this other reason and how it fits in, fine. Everything doesn't have to be overflowing with joy. I mean, there's stuff that, I don't like doing and I got to do it. But I'm saying like that fits into what I'm building, like kind of a larger vision. But if I'm in the way that if I'm always doing that, then that's actually where I'm spending. There's no making a sacrifice for something.
Yeah.
It just becomes that's the way. And then that's that kind of pitiful or that like begrudging way then becomes how people live. Yeah. And then like where's the life affirmation that you're like the compost, right? And the manure is to grow the good thing. Yeah. It's not just to live in the manure and the compost. That's not the purpose, right? You're going to go weed everything out. You're like, I'm going to spend all the time weeding, got to get rid of Well, what are you growing?
Yeah.
Right. That's the nourishing, the life affirmation. That is important. And like there's manure involved.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't mean we have to, I love the manure. I mean, some people do, but it doesn't have to be this like, no, this is stinky work and it's serving this other purpose.
Yeah.
Right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. That's a good point, though. I think we should offer a class in, like nose and
you don't have to put the manure in your pocket and carry it around and
strengthen your nose and celebrate your yeses. How about that? Yeah. Because I think that's where the struggle is for people, and that's why you see so many. And all I can talk about is Black women. You see them in these, even in these organizations, in these churches, and all these places where we hold court and we hold it down. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we are holding it down to our detriment. Yep. Because if we don't, what happens? The world falls down.
Right.
And we know that. We understand that. And so.
And that's why it's important. Like it's really important when I say this making the sacrifice and not being the sacrifice and not being really personal, because some of the responses like, well, this needs to be done. And I'm like, yes. And where is that place where there's some life affirmingness in you as well and in your community as well? That's the piece that I think is really important and to stretch into that also is important.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we don't live.
Because I think
And then what?
We can change our. I mean, we've got to change the dynamics of how we do this thing. I think we can hold up the world and still not sacrifice ourselves for the sake of it.
Because then what are we then really creating?
Yeah.
Right? We're creating a world that we don't live in.
Yeah.
That's really what we then create. Where we create a world that has no place for us. That's a good point.
Yes.
And I'm interested in how do we have both?
Yeah.
And if that means that I got to say no and lean on someone else and say, how can we do this differently? Then that's also important.
Yes.
But if it's only the point. I'm the martyr, I'm the one who has to die for this, then you're also setting it up to be that way. And there's no other alternative to well, what does it mean to live and be struggling for these things?
Yeah.
And that's different.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't have a lot of practice in. I don't have a lot. I mean, these are things that I kind of talk about and struggle with, because it was very much these are the things that are valuable to do.
Mm-hmm.
And being the sacrifice is one of those things that's valuable to do.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And things fall apart, but it's in service of this thing.
Yeah.
And so that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And to look at how can I be part of something different? Because for me in my life, that actually wasn't enough. I mean, I got to that point. It was this is not enough. I've got all these analyses. I've got all these things. Have moved all this change. But the life part is what was missing.
Yeah.
What is that life affirming part that is tied specifically to each person? And to go back to this story, tied to your purpose and your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm really moving towards liberation for myself and for other people, then it also has to be connected to that. Because if your liberation is only based on fitting a certain narrative or a certain box, then that's not it. That's
who are you liberating?
Right.
Where's the liberation in that?
Right.
He is going from box to box.
Right.
So we don't want that.
We don't want that. We got that already.
Yeah.
We got that already. There's enough systems in place being for you to be good, for you to be valuable, you need to show up in these ways. Right? That's already.
And that's what
this
this is what I'm enjoying this life of mine at the moment, because I'm figuring out new ways to show up in myself.
Right.
That has nothing to do with other people's expectation of how I ought to be. And I find that so liberating.
Yeah.
Where I don't give nothing about a thought or a care of other people's expectations of what I ought to do. And I think once you let go of that,
right.
freedom is just down the road a little bit. And because you know what, we don't have a lot of time. I'm acutely aware of time these days. Not time in the sense that I must do everything, but time in the sense that I don't want to waste. And I don't think any time is wasted, but I think I don't want to spend time come see, come saw. I want to do things that if I could cuss on this, it would be a F yes. I want the F yeses.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I want more F yeses. Everything can't be a F yes. Right. But I want more of the F yeses than I do with the somebody wearing me down and I have to say no.
Right. That's more of our default.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, it doesn't mean that everything is the F yes, but sometimes it'll even feel like one step in that direction feels like it.
Yeah.
Because things are so out of balance.
Yeah.
So to prioritize your needs, your purpose, your destiny, however you want to frame it, your yearnings, right? Those intimate places, is really vital. Otherwise, why are we here?
Yeah.
Or why is the you distinct from the me, even as we're connected and interconnected to all light and all wonderful things? But it's critical that we find our way that's related to the specifics of who we are, and not just get into okay, well, it's got to look this way, it's got to look that way, and I just have to take it. Yeah, because that's just what it is.
Yeah,
and it's well, sometimes we have control over circumstances, sometimes we don't. But how can we still be as whole as possible so that when we hit those circumstances, if they're telling us a no, if they're saying you got to fit in the box, we can respond to that from a place of more wholeness versus the reactivity, or versus the well, I guess this is all I get, or I guess it's just how it is. the ways that we've internalized our smallness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that relationship of I'm prioritizing my needs, and it actually means that I can be more connected to those outside of me in a way that matters more, in a way that's more relevant and significant for everybody.
Yes.
I mean, that's the piece even around that quote, like, because what the world needs is people who've come alive.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's, because like if you can be clear, then I can trust what you bring.
Yes.
And be like,
right?
yeah, I don't even know what it is, but like you can bring it. That's the fullness of you. Great. And who are you? And you can do this other thing. Great. And now we're creating something that's based on life versus like, all right, I need the person to do this thing. Okay, you're going to do it, like the task. Okay, I'm going to do it, but it's going to be a grind, but I'm in it. And then what you create the grind.
Yes.
Right? You create the like sustaining of a system that is grinding you down.
Yes. And that's a hard thing to talk about with people.
Mm.
You know, where is that for them? Like, what is that? Like, where is that?
Ways that we are perpetuating a system of grinding us down.
What?
Well,
like we are our own assassins. We are our own assassins, and we don't know it. And we drag ourselves through this life all the time. I saw a quote the other day that said, I love this quote. It said, "Stop wishing for Friday. Stop wishing for summer. Stop like create a life where
what you want to be in."
Yes.
Yeah. Well, also, so to me, if we can connect with the things that are life affirming, that are larger than the box, right? Then we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if all we think of is, well, what makes my life valuable is kind of within this. You achieve this, you hit this, you look like this, and that's actually not enough. But if that's all we think is enough, then we create a life that fits neatly in there.
Yeah.
And actually doesn't come close to the edges because it's uncomfortable. But if we can be connected to what's larger than that, like the earth, I'll tell you a quick story. So 2016, friends of mine, I was visiting some friends who live in Soulfire Farm. They live out in Grafton, New York. Mm-hmm. Family of color, connected to justice in really dynamic, wonderful ways, living in a rural, mostly white community.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. You want to stay?
We can go a little more.
We can go a little longer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this was during the 2016.
Okay.
We're getting some technical updates.
Now? Okay. If you just tuned in, you've got Lovebabz Love Talk on 103.5 WNHH, and we are live streaming on New Haven Independent. I'm Babz Rawls Ivy, and I am talking to my good friend Enroue Halfkenny, and we're having a wonderful, rich, spiritual conversation that's going to go into the next hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Can't stop talking.
No, I love it though.
I know, that was good. So, 2016, this rural community, and we went into town to run some errands, and there were really large Trump signs around, and kind of paired with that in some places were some Confederate flags. So this is new because we've been going there for a while, and kind of this was kind of a new side of this community that was being much more explicit. And so, going past like a gas station or a convenience store and like seeing some of these on, like, brought up some real fear that I hadn't felt in a while. It's like, oh, like things could happen differently than I thought they could. Went back to their house on their farm, and I was looking out their window at the landscape and the hills and mountains around them. And I was like, typically, what's restorative to me is to be in nature. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go, spend the afternoon walking around. And after these errands that we ran, I was like, I'm not going out in the woods by myself. I don't know who's out there with a gun and sees some black person running through. Well, I thought it was a deer, right? And
that's real.
So yes and no. So what happened is, in that moment, I've really felt it, and this didn't happen fast, but it did happen. And I said, okay, so now I'm afraid to do something that I normally do. And I mean, the reality of when I go into the woods, I'm vigilant about people anyway. I mean, one is I like to be alone, but it's also there's this like, I don't know who's there, what they're doing, or if they got a dog or whatever. So that's kind of a normal vigilance that I have. But this was different. This was really like a fear and like a safety, like I could die. And what I realized is I was looking out the window at these hills and the trees and this beautiful scene, as I said, wow. So because I saw, if I put all those signs and flags together, that might make one thing that's maybe like, say 10 by 12. And because of something that size, if I put that out in the woods that I'm looking at, the woods and the hills around me are so much larger in scale. But because of the size of that, I'm going to deny myself this thing that's actually restorative.
Oh, my God. That is a damn good lesson right there.
And as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, I'm going out in the woods because that's what I need to do. Yeah. And I'm not going to be disconnected from the thing that is actually life affirming because of a message that is, that seems dangerous, that very well can be dangerous, that is dehumanizing. And so that's the way that if we can connect to the things that really like, oh, my narrative about who I am as a human being, what I'm connected to is larger than the narrative that a system is trying to tell me about who I am and what I can do. And in that way, you can then go to the boundaries and go to the edges and be clear about how to navigate that differently. Than like, oh, I can't get close to the edge because I might something, I don't know, and I don't know how. And so that's been a really important thing for me, not to just say like as if oppression doesn't exist. And I'm like, I just live in this place where like everything is fine. But it means that I can be connected to something and then see clearly where there's kind of danger or not, or where there's risk or not, or how to navigate that differently than an assumption and a fear that makes me small.
That's a good point. I love that. And, I don't even have to go with the danger thing. You know what?
Right.
Lose everything you have. Lose everything you have and still be standing. And what happens? You are not your things.
Right.
If you don't have a car.
Your life is bigger than that.
You still breathe because you don't have a car. Now you're nothing. Or you lose a job and now you're nothing. You're still the same person. You just don't have a job.
Right.
Or you lose your house. Am I not the same person if I lose my house?
Right.
If I lose my house, I'm still Babz.
Right.
The house doesn't make me Babz.
I mean, there's real things around, what that does. Like there's real things around suffering. But that's an important notion. Like our lives are bigger than these things.
Yes.
And if we can connect to that, then we actually can navigate the things. Better. We can navigate not having a home, not having a job better.
Yeah.
Because there's an understanding of like, oh, okay. And it's going to be challenging because in this culture, we are very much paired with and defined by the things, by what we consume.
Yes.
What it looks like we're consuming.
Yes.
Or,
good point.
All these things. And we get caught in that. So then when that changes, it is so much more disruptive because like, oh, now who I am is different.
Yes.
Well, only because we have paired that together.
And this is not a conversation that says run around and say I'm a vegan or I have oxygen in my house or do you know what I mean? Like it's not this. What
do you mean I have oxygen in my house?
Like
hopefully everyone's got oxygen in their house.
Fresh tanked
some
oxygen.
Like tanked oxygen. Okay.
Like I might have an air purifier. No, that's not it. This is not a conversation about who's better at whatever. Because that is just another. Well,
that's another thing.
That's another prison.
Yeah. Right.
That's another prison. What we're talking about.
I have the right way.
Yes. And there's only the way.
So to name also, that is also from a particular cultural lens.
Yeah.
About there being one way.
Yeah.
And most indigenous traditions don't have that. There's a your way, which is different than my way, and I may not like your way, but like, fine, it's your way, which is different than a kind of a settler colonizing mentality, which is like, oh, no. For you to exist, you have to have my way because this is the right way. This is what's going to run things because this is all that there is. And that, so from a traditional framework, even among the Yoruba, even if people are devoutly Christian or Muslim, there's an understanding and for some, there's still an understanding and a connection to this traditional religion and system. It's seen as a part of their culture and a part of who they are. So you'll see people participating in traditional religious events, even if their kind of primary religion is Christianity or Islam, because it's an understanding of how it flows through. But that's not something that you typically see in other places. It's kind of like, this is the one way or no way. And there then people who are more rigid in that, who will say, no, the traditions are this devil, this is evil, and are actively destroying the culture. Traditionally, even in the sacred literature, it's told that it's okay for some people's destiny to be about practicing a different faith tradition. So within Ifa, within the Orisha sacred literature, in like a spiritual reading or in consultation, somebody may be told, so we're going to do this work now, but actually it's your destiny to be in a different tradition. And I don't hear that so much. Right? You go to that spiritual leader, and they're like, no, you should be here.
Yeah.
This is the way.
I mean, I think the only thing that's probably close to that is like Buddhism. They don't sort of confine you to.
Well, it depends on if people are in the kind of religious aspects of it.
Oh yeah.
Or the philosophical aspects of it, because there's still
there's
rigidity and there's still fundamentalism and fanaticism. People who are Buddhists are killing other people. So like that is also
that is a thing.
That still happens with people in their brains and what they're doing.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so I mean, even touching back to this piece around like purpose and destiny, like we all have a different one, and we're all people, we're all human beings, but what is meant for you and what is meant for me is different, and where we are at in that is different, and can we allow that also to be? Right? Can we also allow that you have just as much of a right to find your way? Instead of saying like you have to do it this way, and there's so many ways that we get that message of there's only one way.
I know, and I always tell people, listen, how many ways can you get to your house?
Right.
How many ways can you get to your house? I bet you there's at least 2 good ways to get to your house, maybe more. Right? Like there's all kinds of ways to get to your house. Even if you live on a one-way street, to get to the one-way street, there's 50 million ways to get to that one-way street.
Exactly. Yep. I'm originally from Boston, so there's never a straight line to go from here to there anyway. You can look at something that I got to go in that direction. No, turn left first. It's going to seem like you're going away from it, but that'll eventually get you there.
I like that. Listen, I'm from New Haven, so and once upon a time we didn't have all these one-way streets. Every street used to be like a 2-way street.
Right.
So it's kind of weird to be like, oh my God, I have to go all the way out of my way to get. And these one-way streets are forever.
Yeah, you're like, just get the next one. Nope. That's one way, the other wrong way.
Nope. Oh, okay. And now I'm like way on the other side of town. Like, oh man, I can't turn.
Also, my dad used to be a cab driver for a while when I was really young, and really before I was born, and so he driving around the city, he always knew like 8 ways to get from like here to there.
Yeah.
And so there was always the moment, which I find myself doing this, the kind of mapping I have to do. Like I'm going to this spot. How do I which way am I going to go to get there? And there's the parade or something's happening. That means I got to go around this other way. And, like there's a lot of ways to get from A to B. A lot of ways to get there.
But I think I like the thoughtfulness of it. I like the thoughtfulness of, okay, I got to get to where I got to go. Let me think about this.
Yeah.
I'm always doing that.
So imagine if we did that for other aspects of our life.
I know.
Right? That kind of, the pause. So to do that, you need to pause out of the routine. Right? Because, I mean, we've all done I'm trying to go to B, but I go to A so many times that I find myself halfway to A.
Yeah.
Because I haven't paused to know, I got to actually turn right here.
Yeah.
And so there's the same things that we do in our lives. Like, okay, I got to pause. So is this really in terms of language, I try to use best. Like, is this best for me versus is this something I should do?
Oh, yeah.
Because should has a whole kind of takes in other people's perspectives in a way that may have absolutely nothing to do with me.
Oh, should takes on judgment.
Right. And so they're like, let me pause. Well, what's best for me? And again, it becomes so it may be like, what is short term? What is long term? Is this a sacrifice I'm going to make to go here or to have this relationship or this phone call or aiming towards this kind of work or how just I want to spend the day or what's happening in a relationship? Well, what do I want to be connected to as I do that versus just being on autopilot? And they're like, well, I'm hoping for when's the Friday coming? When's the summer coming? Then things will be good. As if
I know. Like you gotta,
that's true.
Like you gotta suffer through the whole week to get to the weekend because that's when you turn up. Because that's when you're most yourself and you're most alive. But why couldn't you be most yourself Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Why aren't you purposeful and dynamic and ready for it on Tuesday or Monday? Like why does when Sunday comes around you dread Monday? I don't want that life. I really don't.
Mm.
I don't want that life.
Right.
And I've taken steps to not have that life.
Yeah.
So you never hear me say I dread Mondays, because I don't dread them. I mean, I have a great life, so I love what I do. So I'm ready. I'm ready to face it.
But even if we have circumstances that we don't love,
yeah.
How can we be with ourselves? Because if we're on Sunday dreading Monday, Monday's coming.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we dread it or not.
And so you're losing out on Sunday.
Right? Because that's going to be awful. And now I'm in the awful. It's it's like,
okay, just deal with Monday when Monday comes.
Monday's coming.
It's coming.
Let me be with how I need to be now. Mm-hmm. And then even when Monday comes, okay, so how can I be with me even as I have to do these things?
Yeah.
Right. And again, that's the split between the kind of being and doing.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, my identity is based on all these things that I'm doing.
And I think that's it, the identity, And so much of our jobs speaks to who we are. Do you know what I mean? Or we allow these jobs to speak to who we are as people. And we give them so much. We give our jobs so much power.
Well, we're taught that.
I
mean, I think that this is the piece where the kind of caution around, we are taught things. I mean, yes. Right? And to be with ourselves differently, we have to actively actually unlearn those things and learn a new way. Mm-hmm. And without that, it becomes, with one aspect, it's why people stay with something that doesn't serve them. Yes. Because there's a fear of, if I don't, at least I know this, or my hurt is such a part of me. If I really let that go, I don't know what I'm going to become. Because we've been taught that certainty is something. We've been taught that there's only certain aspects of what our capacity is, our potential is. We're taught, there's a narrative around, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, about being dynamic and individual, but then systems are created to fit people into boxes and
there's this other narrative too, Enroue, that says, well, you've been doing this for so much, you've invested in this,
right?
You're invested, and do you really want to walk away from this investment now after you've spent? Mm-hmm. And I hear that people in their relationships, I hear that mm-hmm. with people with their jobs, I hear that with people with friendships, I hear it all the time. Yeah. I've invested.
So in this tradition, so one of the things that speaks of is the fear of change, and that change itself is seen as dangerous, is seen as, right, the kind of unknown is a bad thing, is a thing to avoid. Mm-hmm. And so in this tradition, and in so many traditions, change is the norm. Change is happening all the time. Or you look at, physically our bodies are actively changing all the time. Cells are living and dying, and we are literally not the same.
Do you know, if you fast for 4 days, if you fast and don't eat, you can change every cell in your body. You can regenerate a whole new you.
Right. And we don't experience ourselves or each other that way.
No.
Right? Like a river is a river because it's changing. If we freeze it, we don't experience it as a river. Mm-hmm. Right? It's something different, and we can't kind of slice it up. Like, oh, here it is. If we slice it all up, then we know what it is. No, so change is a fundamental piece of reality, and there's a lot of work to not understand how to navigate that. And so in so many traditions, and in this traditions, change is seen as the norm, and we have to create the peace that we want. And we do that through, again, making sacrifices and choices. But it's not just it's something that's again, a relationship. So like if things are moving, well, we have to like adapt and dance with that, and like, oh, I got to repair this, or I got to build this up. Mm-hmm. But there's a recognition of that versus we're going to pretend that it's not happening, or we're going to fight against it. Right. And so then that creates other systems and other problems because we're trying to fight against that. Right? How are we going to fight? So we are all aging. Everyone listening to this will be dead in, I'll just say 200 years, probably shorter than that, but it's 200 years. Whole new people on the planet. Right. And there's a fight to not be present just with the fact that we're going to age and we're going to die, and the fragility of that, and actually the blessings and the beauty because of that. Mm-hmm. Plastic plant does something, right? It has value, but it has a completely different value than one that's alive and that takes care.
Yeah.
Right. Flowers, beautiful. they're super temporary, right? And that's part of their preciousness, and that's part of the connection that and why we value them so much, because that is actually connected to this thing called life. And the more that we can learn to dance with that and navigate that, the better it's going to be. The more connected to it we'll be, the more connected to our relationships, our purpose, meaning, being as free as possible we can be. Because without that, what are we creating? And what are we trying to hold on to? And what are we trying to not face?
Yeah.
And what's the cost of that?
Yeah.
Right? If I don't want to feel the fear, I'm going to shut that down. Well, then there's a cost of not having courage. There's a cost of not growing, because that's discomfort. But if we're not growing, then...
And how much time do you want to give to that? How much more time do you want to give to those kinds of things? Because that's not living your best life.
Right.
You know, you just exist. I don't even know if that's existing.
Well, it's existing, but I think there's part of it around being taught. Like, people are also really taught explicitly that that's all there is. And to just do that and to fit where you fit, and that's enough. And, you know, I mean, otherwise, I mean, this can get into like what is around like wealth and redistribution of wealth and education and like purpose and meaning, right? And our education system is not based on teaching people to learn and to maximize their potential as learners. Doesn't not at all.
No, that's not the mission.
Right. That's not the mission. Right. And so, you know, if those things were more built in, then people would learn. My wife just told me this morning they were looking at empathy, and actually the rates of empathy in like the last 19 years have dropped. They do these studies and measures of empathy have dropped like 40%. Like, people have less empathy now than they did like coming out of World War II, when there was this care and this development and practice and policies and institutions that cultivated it matters, right? And so empathy is someone is hurting and I have pain that's similar, so I can feel what that is. And we've quote drifted, and it's been cultivated to step away from that. And so you can see that in the dynamics of like of everything, right? The capacity for empathy. I mean,
reality
is way
shows are designed around not having empathy for your fellow human being.
Right.
They are devoid of humanity. Right. Seriously, that's what they do. And so that appeals
as entertainment.
As entertainment. Right. Yes.
But it's to remember though that it's not, and this is the tricky thing around it, appeals to people. People are also taught that there's benefit and gain from that.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so that's the hook.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to be on a reality show? You want to just act this way. And what are you going to get? You're going to get some money. You're going to get fame. You're going to get held up in some way. And those are then the values of our culture. And so the values of the culture kind of are encouraging a certain way of being with people. And so then that all the like trickle through of systems and power and hierarchy and like, no, it's not really about justice. It's about you just doing what I tell you to do. And if you don't, this is the punishment that's going to happen. And it's not about relationships. It's not about learning. It's about punishment. There's no empathy in that.
None.
Right?
No, that you're
and so then you get a whole, this kind of cultural transformative
I'm
piece.
waiting for the shift. We need a shift. I don't know what that'll look like.
Well, again,
I mean, I think, you know,
what's bigger? Connecting to the things that are bigger, connecting to the narratives that are bigger, connecting to the ways of being that are humanizing, because that's what's needed.
Yeah.
And you got to hold on to that and develop that in the way, I mean, that's some of even why I'm here. It's like how to share that, like, no, this matters and this is important and it's possible. And there's all kinds of obstacles. And like, well, what else is our life for? Right? How can we live and be as whole as possible? That's a big question
when you ask people, what is your life for?
What's it for?
We should do a poll on the street.
Yeah.
What is your life for?
Yeah.
Don't ask anybody their destiny or any of that. What is your life for?
That whole piece, right? Like, if you're not willing to die for something, what is it? You won't live for something, or there's some notion of that. It's like, well, what would happen though if we said, what do you like? Life is hard. Actually,
it is.
Right? And so, what are you willing to actually live whole?
Yes.
With and by, like, what are you willing to do? What sacrifice are you willing to make to do that? Because again, in a culture of kind of martyrdom, it's easier to be like, oh, I'll give up myself to just do the thing for
I
y'all.
love the way you roped in that sacrifice piece in that particular, because then that makes sense to me to sacrifice but not in a way that makes me a martyr.
Right.
A sacrifice in a sense that what am I willing to give up to live a better life?
To live a more full, whole, authentic life.
Yes, a full, whole, authentic life with love and respect and care. And
because that means that the internal pieces, again, have to be looked at and addressed and tended to and cared for. Not just like we're cut it open and look at it and expose it, but like there are things we need to be some nurturing and need some care.
Yeah.
And can we be the first people to say yes? And I'm going to try to find a way of doing that.
Yeah.
And then the things that are in the way, I can address differently.
Yeah.
The things that bring it in, I can address differently.
Yeah.
And I can learn to find a way that's, again, really relevant for who I am and what I need. Because there's not if there was kind of a general need, then like people wouldn't be like particular with who they were with.
Right.
Because we'd all just be people. Right. But no, it's like being with this, it's like puzzle pieces actually fit together. Right. And that means something. Right.
No, it does.
I don't want to be in that relationship because I couldn't deal with what y'all are dealing with.
Yes.
But it's working for you. Great.
Yes.
And you couldn't be in mine because same reason.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the specificity of like, well, we all came here the same way. We got different destinies. We got different needs. We're fitting into ourselves and with each other differently. And then what are we willing to sacrifice? What are we willing to grow? What are we willing to give up something for something else to really be connected to that, to nourish and nurture that?
And I like this thinking. I like this thinking a great deal because it you know, I remember being a young woman going to college and coming out, and I had the corporate life and I was a buppy, you know, Black urban professional. I had a fly apartment and money and I wanted all those things and I had all those things. But then after a while, once you stand on that, you're like, all right, what else?
What's next?
What's next?
Well, because that's the churning. You always got to get more.
You always got to get more. And there's no happiness to it. It's happiness in the sense that, oh, I'm happy in the moment because I'm out and I'm cute and I'm da-da-da-da. But it was a hollow happiness. Yeah. You know, like I felt the call for something more. And so I started to like, okay, let me shift a little bit and see if I could, you know, maybe not stand in the calling, but just kind of like put my ear to a little, see if it's something I really want to put my attention to.
Right. Is there good there? Right.
Yeah.
Is that hollowness going to be something going to fill it or feed it in a different way?
Yeah.
Not just mask it, not just kind of fill it temporarily, but is there something that can be a little bit more lasting?
Yeah. And
that's where, because if it's not, then like, well, I guess I'll just stay with the hollow and this is just what it is. But like, I mean, I felt that too. It's like, there's something that's more.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
But like, I can start to, it's like, I liken it to, you know, it's like a feeling. So I don't know what it is, or like a smell. I don't know what that is, but like, it's over there somewhere. Like it's more over here than over here. So let me turn that way because at least I'm closer. And then maybe I go out the door and like it's fine. That's the path. That's like finding our way to these things. And then it's like, oh, and then here it is.
Yes.
Now, oh, maybe I can make it, or maybe I just need to come back here to like keep working it, or like, you know, I need this thing.
Yeah.
So that becomes, now I found this thing. Now I can orient towards it a little bit better. Then the like, well, it may smell good, but last time something smelled good, right? Someone was out the door and they tripped me and like offered it to me and then took it away. So I'm going to like ignore that. And so that becomes the way we ignore the things because of the ways they may have hurt us in the past. And so now it's, well, can we find a different capacity to see if, well, something in me is orienting towards that. Maybe I need to explore that more. And maybe I can do it now as an adult or at this point in my life in a different way and take care of my needs now. So when I look around the corner, oh, it is clear. Instead of I'm going to sit in the room because I'm afraid of what's around the corner.
Yeah.
If something was around the corner then, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But now maybe I can look around it, or maybe I can ask somebody who's walking by or do something to safely move towards it. Something I talk about with people, you know, because of these notions around trauma and healing, like we're not just picking at scabs we had this hurt, so let's kind of go back and do it. But something in themselves is waking up and pushing against the vault doors.
I believe
right?
I believe that in everybody that there is
so just
that,
listen to that.
But I think we know how to shut it. Like we know how to
shut it down.
We got
those vault doors. And so what I share with people is like, so if your own system is putting cracks in that door, it might mean that you have a capacity to deal with that differently than you did before that caused it to be shut down in the first place. So we're honor what you needed to do then. And your own system is saying that it may be time for something else, to open up the door a little bit, or to maybe patch it so there's a little bit more stretch. It's not the sealed door, it's this like rubber door, or it's a revolving door, or whatever it is, that there's a little bit more capacity. And so it's actually honoring the healing capacity that we all have, and say, okay, so you might just need some support in doing it. You ain't got to figure it out by yourself. Whatever that support could be. It doesn't need to be therapy or healing in one way, shape, or form. Could be community stuff that people are doing. Could be creative things that people are doing. But something is moving in them. It's like the tree is growing and it's starting to push against right the boundaries in the container, and so that's where the stress is. Not because you're falling apart, but because you're actually ready to be different, be more of yourself.
And that's it. And and that's if I could get with people and have these conversations with them when they're going through these troubling, stressful times, that's the message. That this is not happening. This is not something that's being done to you.
Right.
The universe is not conspiring to like put you under the thumb, break you down. It's really trying to break you out. If you could shift your thinking a little bit to sort of see all these, because it took me a while to figure that out. I was in this middle of a storm. I mean, I was battling things on all fronts, like every front there was a fire. And I was like, I said, you know what? I'm just going to stand right here. I'm going to catch my breath. And I'm just going to move to fire, to fire, to fire, putting them out. I'm not going to try to put them all out at once.
Right.
Okay, this is the one that's the hottest. Okay, I'm going to put this one out. And then I'm going to gently move over to this one. I'm going to douse this one. And then I'm going to go over here. And that's how I came through all of that. Right. Just like not screaming like, oh, I'm on fire. Like, okay, this is a fire. I'm going to put it out.
Right. I mean,
and I recognized something was happening.
You can either be the fire. I mean, maybe that's what's called for, or like be the water.
Yeah.
But that intentionality, like it's not you can't do everything at once.
You can't.
It's like, oh, here, let me do that. And then you actually have some space. Yeah. Well, now that's out. You can come back and rest here a little bit while I'm working to get these other ones out.
My uncle taught me at a very young age. He taught me three things. He's like, one, pack light, travel light. So that was my college lesson. So he gave me that. Two, use your credit cards for like dining and things. He's like, don't buy stuff that they can repossess. Use your credit cards for like for dinners and trips, that kind of thing.
Experiences.
Yes, experiences. Use your credit cards for experiences because they can't repossess those.
That's smart.
And the third thing is, oh God, I can't remember what the third thing was.
Don't forget the other two.
I know. Don't forget the other two. I forgot my train of thought. But anyway, those things have stayed with me. I pack light. I use my credit cards for experiences. And the next thing will come to me. I don't remember because that was the biggest thing. Now I can't remember what it was. Uncle Lonnie, if you are with me, bring it back to my spirit what those lessons were. But anyway, so yeah, there is that. Oh, I know. There is nothing is the end. Like you can, there's no finality to things. What you think is there's no finality. So never feel like something is over. You just move to the next thing. Do you know what I mean? So he was like, you just move through life to the next level, to the next thing. It's not.
Well, also what that reminds me of is so many times people have an interaction and then it, later that, oh, I wish I could, or it's over. It's like, well, go back, talk to the person. Oh, but that happened like a week ago. Right. Talk to them. You could say like, you know, the thing that happened a week ago, I'm still thinking about it. But this was okay, not okay. Like that's also part of like, there's not the finality.
Yes.
We can actually revisit things.
Yeah.
And repair.
Yes.
Right? Or kind of recover to something that's meaningful.
Yeah.
That we want to hold. Because like if we're holding something, say, okay, well, I'm holding it. Like why? Somehow we've been taught that we can't.
Yeah.
Right? Oh well.
That's a good point. I like that. That you can go back and and you know, and it's funny because I think the universe has done that for me a lot in the last several years. Has brought me back around to people and places to have a different conversation about things that had jumped off wrong. And has really put me in touch with people that I never thought that I would speak to again. And there's been so many instances where the universe has set that up for me so that I went back and I was like, oh, I see what you're doing. God, I see you. Oh, I'm back in front of this person. And the weight of what it was is no longer there, and we can have a conversation because neither one of us is in the position that we were in at that time. And so, and I think some of those experiences was to say, okay, let it go. You know, just it's done. It's done. Let it go.
Yeah. We hold on to a lot.
Yes. You know, I know I have. Woo.
Well, even in a day-to-day, right? Like, oh, we don't get a parking spot, or we get splashed by something, or we drop a thing, and like our day is ruined. And like, wow. After a certain point, our mind is what's keeping it going. The event is over, and our experience of it is done. And it can have other consequences, like, oh, now I got to like change my clothes, or now there's other things, and now I'm late. But like, we get stuck. Our minds get stuck in the like, oh, now it's bad. Now my day is bad. Now everything is wrong. Like whatever, like that kind of story. And what it means, our mind throughout the day is kind of picking it up and like pushing it along a little bit more. Oh, it was running out. Oh no, remember? Oh, that was awful. Yes, and all we're living. That's the ways that we kind of live in the past. Yeah. Which is different than like when I hear people saying like, you know, forget the past, move on, and they often mean that in terms of you know, traumatic things that have happened or difficult things that have happened. Say, well, it kind of depends. If it's alive for you now, like if that thing is actually still causing pain, then it needs to be addressed. Like if you can't talk about, you talked about your uncle. So let's say a like kind of grieving process had never happened, and you talk about him now, and like you feel that pain now. That's a sign that pain is alive. Yeah. So that needs to be addressed, which is different than just like, oh, that was sad. And then it's not alive anymore. So I don't need to go investigate it. That's fine. You can move on. You can be like, yeah, this happened and I was sad, and now I can think of the good things. But very often that phrase of like move on, which goes along with this kind of Americana of like, you can just recreate yourself and be something and ignore your past. I mean, that serves a purpose, really. You know, if we kind of do that, you know, that's serving a system that doesn't want to be held accountable. Yeah. And I like, you know, I like move. I don't like move on in terms of grief. I don't like when people say it for that, because I think that's hard and not helpful. But I do think there's a necessary sort of way to say move on when people dwell and stay stuck on things that it's not coming back. You know, it's not coming back. You're not going to get that back. Them, they, that, it. You're not going to get it back. And so you've got to sort of which is actually still grief and loss.
Yeah, still grief and loss on a lot of levels. Yeah. But you know, don't sacrifice the here and now for what was, because you still have a lot of life in front of you. And yeah.
Well, I
hope
it's getting a little abstract, but I think that sometimes that happens when people actually don't want to deal with what the loss really was. Yeah. And so there's a like, I want to be distant from it and move on, but I'm stuck. And so like, okay, so if you're actually stuck, you need to do something different. So let's look at it to see what's really there. I mean, if nothing's there, then like, okay, you know, it's like if it's an experience. So if it's the the meaning and the hurt. So let's say, you know, someone like hits you and it's, well, they hit me then. I'm like holding on to it. It's like, well, so what are you then holding on to? Like, it's not the physical piece. It might be a relational piece, or it might be what it means to you. Like, oh, it means I have to do this or not that, but something is not being addressed and you're holding on to something else. And so that's a kind of a place to explore, like, what are you holding? Because by holding that, right, you're not living, you're stuck in something.
Yeah.
Which is different than like a harm that's, I mean, there's some similarities, like a harm that's being repressed, but it's still, you know, person's still limping. So that's actual pain, but you're ignoring it. So like, we got to go in and see what's wrong, versus well, it means that they never liked me and I thought this. It's like, okay, so what story is just running around and around in your head? And like, let's work to change that story.
Yeah.
Because you're caught in a story it's not happening anywhere around you, but you're behaving as if it is. Right? This bad thing happened, and so it's you too, and like, well, maybe not. Maybe you don't have to believe whatever that story was.
Yeah.
I mean, the challenge of this is when it's grounded in the particulars of people and what's happened, it's much easier. I think that's, you know, I'm always cautious around, like, you know, this is the way to think of it, or this is what hurt is or isn't, because it literally is like, what is happening with you and what's alive and what's not. And we can't there isn't the like blanket intervention or model or practice, because sometimes people will take a kind of a thing that works for someone else. They're like, oh, I guess I got to do that. And they're working it. This isn't working, but something must be wrong with me. No. Why? It's like the laws of attraction, the secret thing.
Yes.
Which I have some feelings about.
Yeah.
Because there's a notion in there that it's an absolute law that if you think about it, it'll happen. And so one counter to that is like, well, so you're saying that like starving children can't think clearly about a sandwich?
And then a sandwich will materialize?
Right. So there's that aspect, but also even separate is the harm that can happen, right, because of that type of thing. So there's thinking that's like, if I think good things, there is positive thinking and positive psychology, like that helps us in our moods, but it doesn't mean we are changing the course of reality to kind of fit us. That's a notion of like, I'm so powerful that I'm pulling reality to me, versus, you know, reality in life like a river, that I'm doing what I can to join that, right? And so we can have things that like synchronicities and are in sync, and these kind of blessings can happen. But for me, that's a matter of joining what reality is and what life is and harmony is, versus I'm pulling it to kind of my will. The other piece is that there are these notions of like people getting harmed and somehow they brought that into being, that it's a victim's fault of doing that. And there's actually some real harm that can happen and distorted thinking, because our culture is already saying, so if we talk about sexual abuse, our culture is already saying, don't trust women, trust men. Right? Burden of proof is actually on the victim. And, I mean, there's all kinds of problems with that. And what this thinking does, it kind of further strengthens that. Like, see, you did something to call this reality into being. And it actually absolves the person who literally caused the harm. And so, yes, there are lots of dynamics in what relationships we get into and how we can be complicit in them, or we can, because of our internalized oppression, we can see ourselves as less than, or people like us as less than. That happens. But to take away the accountability and responsibility for the person who's actually doing the harm is absurd, and is actually further harming of the person, gets in the way of their own healing. Because then it's like, somehow I just have to think differently. And like, trauma actually distorts your thinking. So you can't think your way out of it, right? There needs to be other things that happen to help you to do that, and recognize that sometimes, wow, you've been thinking in a really distorted way. Like, wow, I actually, you know, for myself, like I did things and behaved in certain ways that like put me in a crisis. And so I had to like learn, there's a difference between like my instinct and intuition.
Yes.
Right. And I thought that my instinct was my intuition. So instinct can be really reactive and protective. Like there is danger. So the example of like the sign and being in the woods, like, oh, my instinct is like, yeah, don't go anywhere. Stay in the house. You'll be safe. Right? Yeah. And that's reactive. But if I don't know it, I might think that, oh, I'm just following my intuition because maybe something was going to happen. And so we actually have to learn where are the places to question our thinking and to question those habits.
And it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the more you learn how to do it.
Right.
the better at it you'll get. I think.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, that's the practice.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're running around the same box.
Yes.
Which is limiting and which is dehumanizing and saying you are less than.
Yeah. You are less than.
Yeah.
And
I don't believe that. Well, right, because that's a lie. I mean, that's the piece of it. That's actually a lie.
Yeah.
And so the more that people can find the things that, and this is the thing. Like, I love sharing my traditions. I love sharing like these ways of thinking, and it is always like, I don't know if it's for you. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Like, I don't have some like secret code of that. But that's what people do. They're like, this is the thing, and you are gonna, and like, no, like, this is what's worked for me, and this is why, and this is how.
Yeah.
And if that's helpful, beautiful.
I
and
love
there
to
are things
say,
here, beautiful.
I love to say, I don't have the answers for your life.
Yeah.
I love saying that to people. I say, I only know what I know for what I've done, and how I healed myself.
Yeah.
And it is not how I am healing myself, because I'm not healed.
Right.
I'm always in a state of,
life ain't over.
No, it ain't over. And listen, it's a good ride. It hasn't always been a good ride. It's been a ride, but it hasn't always been a good ride. Right now, it's a good ass ride.
Yeah.
It's a good ride because and I have very little. Like, I don't have a lot of things, and but I have a quality of life that I'm enjoying, that I'm trying to cultivate beyond in a bigger way.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I hear the focus is on the beingness of it.
Yes.
Right.
Because I'm just so acutely aware of time at 55. And here's the thing, Enroue, at 55, I don't feel like I have anything else to prove. Like, I'm not that young. I'm not that wide-eyed, bushy-tailed girl out of college and grad school and all. Oh, I must. And then, oh, no.
I had a great realization the other day. So I just turned 51, and in a good way, I was like, wow, it's all downhill from now. It's all downhill from here. But the notion, so usually we say that as like tumbling down. It's all things just gonna fall apart. And instead, I was like, no. I've been like walking and biking uphill hard. Now I get to coast. I get to enjoy the view. I get to like lay back, or like I'm sledding. Like, this is great. I can like the effort. And so what it means though is that for a lot of my life, and for good reason, even the transformations that I've been through took real effort, right? To be a different way, to change those habits, takes effort.
Yes.
It takes a lot of work. And there can be ways that, I talk to people now, or people kind of get to know me, experience me. Oh, they have this idea that this is kind of how my life has been. And I feel super blessed right now. And it's taken a lot of work. To get my thoughts together, to get my health and well-being together into the aspect that it is. And that's a renewed piece. And this coasting piece, what I realize is that I need to learn that I don't need to push so hard in my life now, because that also became a habit.
Yeah.
Oh, relentless. Like, if I'm going to be clean and sober, if I'm going to be healthy, if I'm going to have these relationships, I got to be relentless, because like my thoughts put me in a place where I didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be here, I need a whole turnaround. And now I can actually trust that process.
Yeah.
I can trust that there's more intuition, that there's more harmony that I've cultivated, that I can allow, even when I don't know where it's going.
I like that.
I can allow that to happen instead of this habit of like, it's a relentlessness around it.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest change for me over the last 3 years or so. That shift of like, oh, there's a new way to be.
I like that. I think that's how I feel too. I don't have this. I've redesigned success for myself. I don't have the same notion of what success is. I have a different design work for that, and it just suits me, and it's not predicated on anybody else's thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
something I feel like I want to add to tie this back to this story I told in the beginning is, so our heads and our destinies, and it's a relationship we also have to cultivate, right? We have to cultivate a relationship with the kind of our connection to the divine, our connection to purpose and meaning. And that itself is a relationship that we cultivate. Doesn't just happen. And it's a real subtle voice of that, right? Really what's best for us. Because there's, our culture is loud.
It is.
Telling you what to do, where to go, how you need to be.
Non-stop loud.
And it's nonstop. And so finding those places to pause and then to cultivate that, because that will then open the way for all of these other things. In this tradition, it's seen that your head, your destiny, your purpose, your inner head, if it's not accepted by it, you won't get it, no matter how hard you try. And so it's not a matter of like circumventing that. It's like, oh, this is actually part of who I am, and I need to understand what that is. And you will, right? The things that you do get that are in alignment with that are also because of that. That's like the first gatekeeper in a certain way, even separate from how we relate to our ancestors and the other Orisha. Like, the purpose is not to live like our ancestors, but it's like, how do we maintain that relationship and draw upon the ways that they sought health and well-being and wholeness and connection to the divine? And how do we take that and like, okay, well, here I am. How do I use this tool? How do I use this tool and this organism that I am in a way that's in alignment with that to further it based on the specifics, like this particular opportunity that we have to be alive? And that's its own wonderful thing. And we're connected. And so it's that first, like, through the lens of like our own purpose and meaning, if we can relate to that and hold that and be curious about it and cultivate that voice, that inner voice around like, when part of the changes I literally had to do to myself, or that's a weird way of saying it, but I had to really understand is I would hear myself saying, yeah, I know, but.
Oh.
Right? Oh, yeah. I know. Like, oh, well, you should really do this. Yeah, I know, but. And what I realized, I started to hear myself say that. And what I realized was like, so what is that saying? That's saying, I know what's best for me, but I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
That's crazy. And so when I realized what that was, I was like, so what if I just put a period after the I know?
Yep.
And what if I did that? I don't have a lot of practice at that. I have a lot of practice at the but. I don't have a lot of practice with the kind of I know. And so literally it was like, I would listen, I would hear myself saying that and I would stop. So, okay, let me put the period, I know, and let me do that.
Yeah.
And so that's a way that we cultivate this relationship with that inner voice, that inner self, that inner divinity, which knows, which we have stopped listening to for lots of reasons, right? Because like whether we got hurt or, got confused or, whatever it was like, well, I can't trust that. I gotta pay attention to what they're doing out there. That's what's gonna get me.
Or I want what I want and be damned what the intuitive self.
Yeah,
is saying.
Exactly. I just want to. That just feels good, or whatever it is.
I want that.
I just want it.
I don't care if it's not the best for me.
And that becomes a choice. And you're like, okay, fine. You're gonna work hard for that. Maybe you'll get it and have this void feeling or emptiness. Maybe you won't get it and you keep banging your head against it. And like, what happens if you listen differently? Maybe you have something, a way to be, or something to offer your life and the people around you that you will only touch upon by listening to that.
Yes.
You will only grow that if you nourish that, because other people can't see that and don't know it, and they can't nourish it in the same way.
This has been a rich conversation. 2 hours.
2 hours.
This. Oh Lord. Whew. This is good.
That's epic.
Oh, people are in the room listening. Okay.
That's so good.
Thank you.
That's so good.
This is
so
good.
Again, super thankful for your health and well-being, for the repairing of your head, yes. And the continued, I hope that it fosters, right, life, right? And continues to. Well, there's the like, yes, of course, but in terms of like, the meaning and the purpose, and like your growth and connection, not simply as a physical task of taking a thing out that is harmful, but the space that's now created, right, for something.
Yes.
So, I continue to hope and pray for your well-being and the well-being of everyone who's listening and not listening. And, may we all be a little freer tomorrow than we are today.
Peace and blessings.
I see.
All right. You'll be back. He'll
Thanks,
be back,
Babz.
people, because this conversation is ongoing. So thank you, Harry, for letting me do this for 2 hours.